What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. It is playoff season officially because we know actual playoff series rather than just play-in games. We are going to provide our primers for all 6 series that we know about, and we will finish the 1-8 matchups on Friday night, schedules permitting. But first and foremost, before we dive into these shindigs, Grant, how the heck are you doing?
I'm doing great. I am excited to talk about these series. The play-in games have mostly been entertaining to this point, so I got the postseason itch going. I will say after the last, I don't know, not several weeks, but few days of the regular season, so refreshing to have these like high intensity do or die games, and we'll just get more of them in the playoffs. I don't want to say you, I always forget how much better the first round is than whatever led up to it down the stretch of the season, with some exceptions. But haven't you noticed that? Haven't you felt how different these games have felt? Just the play-ins, really, too.
Yeah, I don't know. There's people who tweet like, "I love the play-in. I don't care what you say," and it's funny because I haven't really talked to anyone who dislikes the play-in. I'm sure fans of 7-8 seeds would prefer not to have to do it. What have you made though of the sentiment? And this steps on the toes of your point, where it's the NBA is a problem because they can't replicate this intensity during the regular season, where it's like it's so clearly there's this separator between playoff basketball and regular season basketball. I hadn't really thought about that, to be honest, but I will say, friend of the podcast from CBS Sports, Kanata Edwards, had said it feels like NBA fans are the only ones who complain about this because playoff level hockey is so much different from regular season NHL games. And I think I kind of fall on his side of the spectrum there, where it's I don't watch baseball or really follow it, but you're going to tell me you're replicating 162 games worth of postseason stakes like across those performances. This just always feels like, to answer my own question, we're always constantly comparing this league to the NFL, which above all else has a scarcity of product that none of these other leagues are ever going to have.
I think basketball is just distinct. I mean, one, it is a problem, and two, it's not going to be solved because the solution is fewer games, and that takes money out of everybody's pockets, and that's not going to happen. So that's part of it.
Games in the new CBA, FY. There's an 83rd game.
Yeah. So we see which way things are going. I think the other thing, so like football, for example, I feel like if you half-ass it in football, there's a great chance you're just going to get clobbered and injured, or embarrassed type of thing. So that's one. Baseball, the season's incredibly long and the playoffs are different because of the fan intensity, I think, and like just the gravity of moments. But like the hitter versus pitcher battle is intensely combative and, competitive. Like you can't go up there and be like, I'm just going to kind of go through the motions in this at bat. Cause no, you're going to strike out, so like every sport's different. And basketball, I think it probably is a little easier to be casual about it or play at 80% instead of 100% and get away with it. So that's the other part of it. But like the real issue is never going to go anywhere because we're not going to have a 17 game season, let alone like 65. That's just not going to happen.
And I don't even know the answer to this question, but how many teams make MLB postseason? Isn't it fewer? Like
they've increased it is fewer, but they've increased it in the last year or two. They've added wild card games to it, which is so brutal because after, if you think getting eliminated in a 1-game playoff in a basketball season sucks, imagine playing twice as many games and your season comes down to 1 game. That's rough.
I suspect if you made like a shift to where it's, only 6 teams make the playoffs, first 2 seeds get a bye, and you structure the playoffs that way, that'd probably open up the NBA to a lot more tanking, which we know will warrant many investigations.
Yeah.
Like they're staging into the
only top. If it's the Mavs and Mark Cuban, though. They're the only team that gets investigated.
Yeah, absolutely hysterical. Are you ready to preview the 2023 NBA playoffs?
So ready.
Let's get to Sixers Nets. The way we're going to do this, we'll just bounce around with our biggest questions or thoughts about this series. And so I will throw it to you to begin this one. Just what are you really thinking about as you go into Sixers Nets?
Yeah, so I started doing prep for these. The first thing I did was just what's my nutshell reaction? What's my overarching, overly broad thought on each series? And so for this one, it's that essentially Brooklyn is 11-13 since the All-Star break. Kyle Kuzma, I think, pointed some of that out to Spencer Dinwiddie in their, which is to say that the Nets' overall record has a little bit to do with the guys that used to be on the team. And so that's just to say that Brooklyn has not been a good team. There have been interesting aspects to its season after the trade deadline, but it's under 500. Offense is number 24 in the league, and ultimately they do not have the bodies to contend with Joel Embiid. And so that's where I start. I just see this being a short series where the best player in it is not going to meet enough resistance to be slowed down. But there are definitely different ways we could go, trying to point out Sixers weaknesses or what might work for Brooklyn on either end of the floor. But that's my overwhelming sense of the series. It's not super complicated. So, I mean, maybe if you feel differently, or if you want to just, take the first plunge into some more granular stuff, I would flip it to you. But do you see, I mean, that seems like the simplest, analysis of this series is that Embiid is there. The Nets don't have what it's going to take to stop him from doing Embiid stuff.
I'm with you on everything you said, and that's how I looked at this series initially. But I decided to approach it as, what could go wrong for Philly or be done right for Brooklyn that would turn this series into, I think everyone's going to say Sixers in 4 or 5 would be the prevailing, and we'll get to our predictions, but I think that'll be the prevailing pick. So some of the things I landed on, there's the Brooklyn bigs versus Embiid matchup. Day'Ron Sharpe is a very big human. He's like 265 pounds. Offensive rebounds the hell out of the ball. We know the Sixers have had their problems with defensive rebounding. Is he an okay matchup for Embiid? I also went back and looked at the regular season, and I think this surprised me. And it's a small sample size, under 70 possessions. But when Nick Claxton defended Joel Embiid in the regular season, the Nets as a team, the Sixers as a team, averaged 0.94 points per possession, which is not good. Now, they no longer have Kevin Durant, who was a huge part of their help defense before he got injured and was ultimately traded. There's that factor. And I think over the course of just a series, Nick Claxton's given up like 60 pounds to Joel Embiid. Yeah. And so that's not going to hold. And so I kind of write that off, but I did find it fascinating that even under the previous iteration of the Nets, because like you do have Dorian Finney-Smith. And so if you try to make him your Kevin Durant and use Nick Claxton the way that you're going to use him, but I ultimately don't ascribe too much value to that. Do you, that number?
Not really. I did have the same thought of, how does it look in a hypothetical where the Nets make this more interesting? I don't think they can win it, but what needs to happen? I think Claxton making Embiid guard him a little bit out on the floor, because one of the improvements Claxton made this year was he's gotten so much better as, 15, 18 feet. He can take one dribble and get to the rim and beat most centers because he's quick. You can fake handoffs, like that kind of stuff. So that's one. And maybe you pick up like 2 fouls on Embiid in the first quarter, something like that, where he's just a little lazy and reaches. And, that's one way to do it. I think just generally speaking, it seems like a pretty obvious move for the Nets to just find Harden in space and attack him defensively. Like I just try to make him involved in every action. That's going to be a theme for me, is just, if you're looking for the underdog to do something surprising, you just have to find a weak point and just exploit it to whatever extent you can. So that's another one. I don't know. I think you might say like Embiid's going to be in a drop most of the game. So if the Nets guards can run hot on pull-up threes, if Embiid's not out to contest and the ball handler defender doesn't get close enough, like I could see that. It's just a lot of stuff that's got to go right. I think a few too many of those things for Brooklyn to win.
I actually do have that circled though with Embiid and drop. And It was to that point, the Nets post Mikal Bridges debut were in the top 10 of long mid-range frequency and accuracy. And so is that their path to, if Embiid is going to be in the drop, you just count on him, Spencer Dinwiddie, depending on how many minutes, some of their other guards are just going to play, or wing players, or whoever you kind of trust to take shots on this team right now, where, Cam Johnson even has like a little bit of the pull-up game to him. Does Cam Thomas get any minutes in this series? You have Patty Mills, Royce O'Neal, Joe Harris, Seth Curry, depending on how many minutes those guys play. However, you mentioned the James Harden point. This team really isn't built to attack the James Harden mismatch, because who is doing it? The Nets were in the bottom 5 of rim pressure after the Mikal Bridges trade. And there's just nothing that's going to suggest that. I mean, and Joel Embiid is always going to be in the vicinity when he's on the floor. So your best bet, I think, at generating rim pressure is, can you have Nick Claxton get after it when Embiid's not on the court, but you need his minutes to mirror Embiid's minutes, I would say. And so that's sort of the other problem. And it led me to just wondering, is the Nets the two things that I could see, and they're both James Harden related, but it's on the offensive end. One, what does James Harden look like with his Achilles? Can he attack mismatches? And even how many mismatches does he get? Because the Nets, they're rangy and athletic on the wings. Dorian Finney-Smith, Royce O'Neal, Mikal Bridges himself. Like those are, even Spencer Dinwiddie can make him work on certain possessions. And so if you're able to not, I don't look at this as a team that neutralizes James Harden. And it's tough to parse the end of the regular season and say, well, James Harden ran hot and cold. He missed some time. The Sixers, even though they were playing a tough schedule, weren't in a ton of high stakes games during that closing kick. Like they kind of knew where they were going to settle for the playoffs. But if James Harden isn't, we can go through James Harden's playoff resume, but even last year when the whole, the ball didn't find me, he ran hot and cold then, he was still able to and he was dealing with hamstring stuff, put defenses in rotation, make good passes. If he's just limited or just really dealing with an Achilles issue and banged up, does that give the Nets a puncher's chance, or are you just able to pivot to Tyrese Maxey's blazing fast, just give him the ball in those catch and go situations and they'll be fine?
Yeah, I think even without the Achilles, I would expect this to be not necessarily a big series for Harden because one, I mean, the Sixers are just going to try to eat with Embiid at the elbows and Harden's just going to give it to him and get out of the way. I think if you get switches, if you're setting screens with Embiid on Harden's man, I think Claxton is more than capable of staying in front of Harden. So like, I don't see a lot of isolation scoring or foul drawing from Harden. I don't see big numbers because that's, to your point, the Nets do have a lot of wing guys. They can just feel very good about handling Harden, anywhere on the floor. Bridges, Dorian Finney-Smith, like Harris has the size even because Harden is not blazing fast anymore. Cam Johnson should be fine. So I don't see Harden having a big series. I don't think he needs to, but I think if you want to flip to the other end, other than Dinwiddie. So let's say, because the Sixers can kind of get a little switchy and you sort of have to 1 through 4 because Harden is just a terrible screen navigator. Other than Dinwiddie. So let's say, the Nets hit like 3 pull-up threes in the first quarter because Embiid's in a drop. And now we need to blitz Dinwiddie, assuming that's who it is, to get the ball out of his hands. I'm not sure. I think I see anyone else on the Nets consistently making plays like in an advantage situation after Dinwiddie's gotten off the ball or whoever is getting doubled gets off the ball because Bridges has been awesome, but he's still, if there's some distance for him to go yet, it's still as a passer. Like he's not an intuitive, make the right decision right away kind of passer yet. So I think this is bad that a lot of this series kind of seems to depend on Dinwiddie because like, who do you think is the guy that's gonna, it gets out of Dinwiddie's hands because the Sixers sent 2 at him and somebody else has it. Who do you want catching the ball in that situation that's going to run the second side pick and roll or straight line drive or whatever? Like, I don't feel great about almost any of Brooklyn's options, with no disrespect to Bridges, but he's just made tons of shots and scored in isolation. It's not quite like he's going to run your offense when he has to.
I would say probably Patty Mills, but I don't know how many minutes you expect him to play. And so if it's not him, is it Royce O'Neal? Like, is that the guy?
You don't feel good about that, right?
No,
That's just,
no.
I mean, it's not a revelation to say like the Nets don't have a lot of great options because they're not as good of a team. But I think for me, I think the way this has to work for Brooklyn offensively is 1, they hit those pull-up threes. 2, if the Sixers have to change anything, which kind of seems unlikely, you're generating corner threes in advantage situations where you just dump it to the roll guy and he finds Patty Mills in the corner or he finds Joe Harris on the wing or whatever. That if I close my eyes, I can imagine that being a way that the Nets score enough. But I don't know. I'm ready. Do we need to, is there anything else you wanted to hit on this before we make our picks and move to the next one?
Does the Ben Simmons absence factor, would he have nudged the needle defensively for the Nets for you at all? Or more importantly, will he wear orange pants at all on the sidelines during this series?
Yeah, pant color is probably the bigger variable than what he would do for this. I think he's just kind of duplicative to what Brooklyn has a lot of already, which are good defenders. Because I think offensively, you put him out there, you might say, well, that's the guy you want to throw it to if you're getting it out of a double team. But then he's not going to shoot it. So I'm not that concerned. No, I don't think his presence or absence really matters that much, which is kind of a bummer. That sort of encapsulates where we are in the Ben Simmons experience.
I hope he ends up just in fucking Charlotte or San Antonio and is able to reboot low stakes, like Markelle Fultz in Orlando. I hope that's what happens. Yeah. What's your Nets Sixers series prediction?
I'll just go Sixers in 5. I think it's probably closer to a sweep than a 6-game series to me. If I had to say which way I was leaning on that 5 game.
I'm going to go Sixers in 5 too, which I think we can call the coward's pick because it really should just be Sixers in 4, but the non-Embiid minutes are still dicey. And if you decide to go, you can go bigger with Paul Reed as the backup 5. But you could go smaller with PJ Tucker, but I don't envy PJ Tucker having to like guard. Can you imagine him guarding Day'Ron Sharp, who's played a lot more for Brooklyn, and he's just going to clean up he's going to be a hoover on the offensive glass. So I'll go with Sixers in 5 there too. Next series is Celtics Hawks. What are you thinking about leading into this one?
Yeah, I think so. Nutshell again, the Celtics are too deep. They're too talented. They have way too many guys to bother Trae Young and make him have another really shitty playoff performance. So I don't feel like this is close. I think watching the play-in a little bit and seeing the Hawks kind of control that game against the Heat. I mean, a Heat team that just like
their offense just sucks.
It's so bad.
Like, I hope. I picked the Bulls I picked the Bulls and the Heat to come out of the play-in for the East. I'm clearly going to be wrong. I hope it's the Bulls. They're a more. People are saying, well, Butler and Adebayo and like that's the tougher match. No, I think it's the Bulls. Like, give me their ball pressure on defense with the shot making of DeRozan and Zach LaVine in the half court at this point.
It's really hard to have faith in the Heat, even though I did just watching that offensive game. It's rough. So I just think that's the easy pick for me. The Celtics I feel like we spend a lot of time almost concern trolling for the Celtics. Like, is Jason Tatum really the guy that can get you a shot, down the stretch of, several clutch possessions? What about the turnovers? Like, Marcus Smart's not like, come on. The Celtics are still awesome. I think they still ended up with the best net rating in the league for the season. So we can get into the details more, but just like by default, a lot's got to go right for Atlanta to even make this interesting.
Yeah, and I think when you start to look at their concerns, it immediately starts with the Jays. You have DeAndre Hunter and DeJounte Murray. Those are bodies you can throw at the Jays. They can't play 48 minutes. And so you're in a position where Jalen Johnson, you're going to need to be relying on him. Do you trust Sadiq Bey, who actually I thought was pretty good defensively at points?
I thought Jalen Johnson was really good in that playing game too. That was
he was. But Sadiq Bey had been like sort of a defensive mess for a while, and it felt like he held up. Going up against the Jays is different from that slog fest of the Miami offense. And then also just Derek White this season, when he's defending Trae Young, the Hawks are averaging 1.01 points per possession. That's not great. So if he puts Trae Young in hell, what are sort of your counters there? You do have DeJounte Murray. You do have the John Collins floor game. But that led me to my other question. It's Boston feels like they're going to force, based off how they've played this year, even when RW3 is healthy, Boston feels like they're going to force Atlanta to not play a lot of the dual big stuff where like the Collins Capella minutes are finite to begin with, but like that's going to be more of a decision where like even more of a decision than normal for Atlanta against this team. It feels like,
yeah, there's a lot of interesting looks. So one of the other angles in that playing game between Atlanta and Miami was how dominant Capella was on the boards, on the offensive boards in particular. I think there's definitely a way that could be a factor if the Celtics don't force him to guard, like say Al Horford, for example. Like that's another big sort of unknown is how much RW3 are we going to get, and like what version of him are we going to get, and then do you even want that if you're Boston? Because I think spacing the floor a little bit without him out there offensively might be a good way forward. But like for the Hawks to succeed, I guess again Capella just offensive rebounding is a big plus, I suppose, or possibility is probably the better way to put it. But it's not like Boston's 12th in defensive rebound rate since the All-Star break. So they're fine. It's not like this is, there's not going to be Capella playing volleyball on the glass, I don't think. Other than that, I think you probably just depend on, you're going to have to slip screens on switches. You're going to have to, if you're the Hawks, you're going to have to hope that Young can just make a bunch of really deep threes to pull Boston out a little further from the basket. I think like someone like John Collins is probably going to have to hit threes too. I think really, as I think about it more, the way that the Hawks win this is the Celtics miss shots like that to me. And that's possible. We've seen it happen. But it's really difficult for me to schematically say, well, if Atlanta can just get to this, or this, it's going to give Boston problems just because of the personnel that the Celtics have and the different ways they can deploy it. I don't feel like Trae Young is going to just get into the lane every time and either make layups or lob, that like he did against the Heat, really under control. I just don't see that happening against Boston.
Yeah, and I worry about Atlanta's bench because some of their top end units have been really good. And at the same time, it's like, well, this could be an Onyeka Okongwu series if you're looking for
Great
someone
point.
who can hold up on
Yeah.
a ton of switches. And Bogdan Bogdanovic's 3-point volume is just super important
Mhm.
to them. And so maybe there's a path to them making it interesting. It does feel like it would be more about Boston doing things wrong than Atlanta maybe doing anything right, because I don't know what the defensive ceiling of Atlanta is against peak Boston offense. And I will say, Boston still doesn't generate a ton of rim pressure. Even when Robert Williams III is on the floor, they're in the 12th percentile of the frequency with their shots come at the rim. That inherently limits their free throw attempt rate. Like we see guys like Tatum and Brown get to the line, and Derek White's been pretty good at that and smart as well. But even a lot of that stuff is predicated on drawing shooting fouls from the perimeter, which is difficult. Atlanta is really, their rim protection is fine, but teams get to the rim a ton against them. If Boston can't do that and they're still sort of bailing out on the perimeter, you've already mentioned this, there's variability caked into their performance.
Yeah.
And I don't think it'll be an issue against this team. So this might be long-term playoff stuff, but Jason Tatum's jump shooting, like creation, has not been up to snuff this year. And so there have been 71 players who've attempted at least 100 pull-up threes this year. Jason Tatum ranks 67th in three-point percentage on that. There have also been 71 players who've attempted at least 250 pull-up jumpers, either threes or twos. Tatum ranks 65th out of 71 in effective field goal percentage on that looks. That's just something to monitor as
Yeah.
he runs hot and cold here. Again, I just don't think it's something that ails them in this series. And Boston's depth, just looking at their top 7 guys, is just by far and away better than Atlanta's. And so when you ask the cliche question of what happens for Atlanta to win this series, I don't know what it is that Atlanta would do that spurs the victory. I'm not saying it would be impossible, but I would view this as more of a, okay, the Celtics lost. That's not to disrespect the Hawks. I have a problem with their shot profile still. I also can't bring myself to care. They were 4th in points scored per possession after the trade deadline. So like the offense is clearly going to work, but like Derek White, I know you just went up against Miami, which has historically defended Trae Young really well. Derek White is, and then having Tatum and then also Brown, but also Marcus Smart, like the options to go after Trae Young, however aggressive or conservative you want to be, are seemingly endless.
I think too, sort of from a roster building perspective for the Hawks, and maybe this is a little unfair, but like this is not a DeJounte Murray series because I don't think he's big enough to really bother Brown or Tatum. And so this big defensive upgrade that you gave up so much to get, like this ain't the series for it. Like if you're going against, I'm trying to even think of, if you're in the West, just hypothetically is the first guy that came to mind. Oh, we got to go guard Ja Morant. Okay, DeJounte Murray, perfect. Glad we have you. But it's like if it's Marcus Smart and Derek White, DeJounte Murray is just not going to be able to make the impact that he otherwise could against different positions. Like if your point guard is your primary scorer, like if you're going against Trae Young, DeJounte Murray would be awesome to have on your team, but he's on his team, and this just he doesn't have the ability, I don't think, to consistently contend with the size of Brown and particularly Tatum, who I think will just shoot over the top of him. I assume Hunter will probably guard Tatum, and I think Tatum will be able to get by him because low key Hunter has not been very good at keeping guys in front of him this year. But yeah, that's just something that struck me as I was looking at this is, man, that's too bad because I think the DeJounte Murray acquisition made a decent amount of sense. They probably gave up too much to do it. But this really, I don't think he can be the kind of factor that you want someone like him to be in this particular series.
It's interesting. I don't really think they gave up too much for DeJounte Murray so long as they were the wrong team to pay that price, if that makes any sense.
Maybe so.
Like the Wolves gave up too much to Rudy Gobert. I don't care what team you were. My last question on this, and I kind of touched upon this, but I don't know where we landed. Is this a dual big series for Boston, or do you expect to see more of the one big stuff?
I would be surprised because I don't think you need a big necessarily to guard John Collins. You could probably get away. Does Grant Williams count as a big, for example? Like, I guess
he's 6'5" or 6'6".
Yeah.
So yeah, he's bigger than me.
You know what? Is it bad that my answer is like it doesn't really matter? I think probably if I'm Boston, I am trying to go with one big more often than not, just because I want to preserve Robert Williams for a series where I'm actually going to need him.
And I think the only way that Atlanta can really counter that is if they really do dominate the glass against Boston, who's been, when it's just Horford on the floor, they have an excellent defensive rebounding rate. So Atlanta would need to really be, I guess, dominating the glass for Boston to maybe reevaluate and say, okay, like we need to go the
Yeah.
RW3 Horford heavy
Yeah.
minutes route.
Yeah. A lot depends on Capella.
Next series, the Knicks versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. You know I'm going to have a lot of thoughts on this, but I'm hoping that you have a lot of thoughts too.
Yeah, we've talked about it a few times. I don't know how much has changed in my thinking. Basically, I think the Randall uncertainty is a big factor, mixed with the concerns about how the Knicks can stop Mitchell and Garland, up high in pick and roll sets. I feel like we're going to come back to this a lot, but if Mitchell Robinson's in a drop, I mean, but so it's a little scary because Garland shot 39.1% on pull-up threes and Mitchell shot 39.2%. And both of them were pretty high volume pull-up three-point shooters. So that, again, we can get down to like, well, it's make or miss, and those guys might just miss those shots. But I think based on the way that the Knicks probably will defend those two guys, it could get problematic pretty quickly. So, this is, again, we're going to have to go through what does a Knicks win look like? Because my default is that the Cavs have pretty distinct advantages, even before talking about, well, what version of Randall are we going to get in this series?
And as we're recording this, we don't technically know his status. He's dealing with that left ankle sprain. My guess would be that he just plays because
I bet
Tom
you he'll
Thibodeau
play.
believes that one ankle is more than enough to win. And also, Julius Randle really just wants to play. Like, that's a guy who's prided himself on being an Iron Man. Someone who I think in retrospect, I probably should have put him on an all-NBA team over Anthony Davis because of the minutes gap. I actually got a lot of shit for that when we did it, surprisingly. Like in my DMs, and friend of the podcast, Andrew Claudio from Knicks Film School, texted me about it. He was mostly calling
that a Knicks supporter was bothered that a Knicks player didn't get.
Some of them weren't Knicks supporters that reach out to me though, and saying that I should not have been as flexible with my like back of the ballot third team stuff.
It's your ballot, Dan. Do what you want with it.
Knicks Film School loves you more than me now, though, because you had Randall on an All-NBA team and you picked quickly to win Sixth Man of the Year. So,
well, I go for the big markets. That's all I care about.
But what I'm interested to see, so you mentioned that I actually want to talk about something you said, the Robinson in a drop. I'm wondering if you can, especially post ankle injuries, you just say Julius Randle's on Jared Allen, and then you have Mitchell Robinson on Evan Mobley, and that's gonna like change the way you might defend, or then it's, well, the Cavs will just try and put Julius Randle in the screening action. Then I just think that that's still maybe a little bit easier because Jared Allen is more dynamic than I think most. I don't know how to frame this in like a respectful, but if you're not watching the Cavs on a regular basis or semi-regular basis, I don't think you understand how dynamic Jared Allen could be on offense. Evan Mobley is far more dynamic than Jared Allen is on offense. But I do think that's a fair question. What's interesting is I think the Knicks could be more aggressive in their defensive coverage because they have Emmanuel Quickley, Josh Hart, Quentin Grimes. However, that brings you in an interesting, is it a dilemma, a pickle to where, well, is this not an RJ Barrett series then? But then do you kind of need it to be an RJ Barrett series if Randall isn't able to create at the same level? And this is, before I throw it back to you, is one of my biggest questions. What does this Knicks offense look like? Because I think a lot of their success is just like, there's been we know about the ISO Brunson and Randall stuff, but they also have like a nice two-man chemistry where they can punish people, where if Julius Randle is going to screen and get the ball, he can attack a mismatch. He can put the defense in rotation. He might not be able to do that against the Cavs because of, one, his ankle. I don't even know. The Cavs could if they wanted to, and I don't know if they'll do this. But like, you could just say, well, we'll dare the Knicks to do this, and we'll just put Evan Mobley on Jalen Brunson. And so if you want to get them to screening, we'll just have Evan Mobley switch on the Julius Randle, or he's playing Julius Randle straight up anyway. And even if you're a fully healthy Julius Randle, you might be stronger than him, but you're not going to have the same level of defensive rotation put in. And I think Julius Randle's gotten better at making the pass in those situations, but I'm very interested to see how Cleveland is able to, in a playoff series, because there was all these weirdo regular season returns this year. What do they do to New York's base offense? And I think that they are built to sort of muck it up, even though in theory, and I think they've both been better defensively than people would have expected. You can try and target Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell and get them involved, but the Cavs just have the personnel to where even if Karis LeVert's your 3, and I'm sure we'll get into the Cavs 3 spot, like I just don't know how concerning that is. And so I think that any of your thoughts on that, but also just like, where do you land on this being or not being an RJ Barrett series?
Yeah, first I take the second thing first. I think it all, you want it to be an RJ Barrett series, but first of all, you were quicker to appreciate Karis LeVert improving as a defender than I was, and so that is something we should mention. I still think if you're the Knicks, you would hope it's an RJ Barrett series, because if he's in the game, probably he's going at that 3 spot that we've said the Cavs needed to upgrade all year. And that, LeVert can't handle Barrett, for example. Like, just depending, Barrett might play some 4 or 2, I don't know. But it doesn't feel like there's anything that Barrett would give the Knicks that is going to meaningfully change how they play offense. Because what I think they want to do, and what they should try to do, and you alluded to it, is you're going to want to attack both of Cleveland's small guards. The Knicks were 3rd in the league in drives per game. I don't think you change that fundamental aspect of your offense. You're going to want to try to get in the paint, but this is going to feel like a drive and kick series to me, because as if it is true, I think, and it is relatively speaking, that Garland and Mitchell are the guys, the weak links, so to speak, the guys you want to go at, if for no other reason than to tire them out, you're just going to run into the best 4-5 backline defensive twosome in the league in Mobley and Allen, assuming they're in and around the lane. As great as Brunson is, it's a lot to ask him to, get into his bag in the paint, in his, mid post.
He's dealing with a hand injury still too.
Yeah. I mean, we're saying all this and he had 48 against the Cavs, right? So like, certainly it can't happen. I just think over a series, you're not going to make a lot of hay driving all the way to the basket against Cleveland, just because of the length and the skill of their 2 best defenders. So it feels like a drive and kick. And that maybe even is another reason this isn't a Barrett series, unless you're getting drive, kick, drive, and you're playing Oklahoma City basketball. That's one way maybe to scramble the Cavs, but those 2 guys are so mobile. They're so mobile. Like, I just don't know that you're going to get Cleveland scrambled in such a way where Mobley and Allen can't recover. So, I mean, I think Mobley's the X factor of the series, because he could probably credibly guard Brunson in space if he had to. And then if he's involved in screens, I feel great about him trying to handle Julius Randle, especially if Randle's mobility is not where it needs to be. So I think, yeah, it's got to be a drive and kick series, and the Knicks may just have to make threes, because I don't think they can win this close to the basket.
And that would be the reason why this isn't an RJ Barrett series, just because like he has not shot the 3 ball consistently at all this year. And his bread and butter is going to be not even necessarily finishing well once he gets into the paint, but drawing fouls. And so like the Cavs are just built to maybe neutralize that part of his game. And look, so much without knowing what Randall looks like, I feel like I'm talking in circles. I do think what might bode well for at least him is like he can pick and pop. Like we've seen he's a willing 3-point shooter. Does some of them are they going to need to be pull-ups? Are they going to be creative for himself? Sure. But like he can screen and just pop. And if the Cavs are going to they might not give him that shot because Evan Mobley can fucking teleport and contest those looks as well. But that's something that they could use. I am, however, interested in and we know if Randall's healthy, he'll play like 49 or 48 minutes a game. But like, let's just say he's averaging 40 or 42. I'm wondering if the Knicks can go, and a lot of it will depend on what Cleveland is running. Is this I love Obi Toppin, but is this a situation where it's, well, no, we're going to downsize. And to make this an RJ Barrett series, we go with the RJ Barrett at the 4 lineups, because those are going to be better equipped to not just drive and kick, but to actually open up driving lanes for Barrett himself. The Knicks are a plus 15 points per 100 possessions with Barrett at the 4 this year. Very small sample size. Mm-hmm. But I'm just wondering if that's not going to win you the series, but is that a way, especially if Julius Randle can't go for 40, 42 minutes a game, and you need to all of a sudden, oh, he's at 38. Like, I'm wondering if they can go that route, or is Cleveland just, even when they go one big, sort of just so demoralizingly enormous that just having Isaiah Hartenstein without an Obi Toppin because I don't even know, like, what is Obi Toppin really going to give you on offense, though? I would pivot to the RJ Barrett at the 4 stuff. That's me loving. I would probably play Toppin at the 5 and say, fuck defense. Like, we're just going to try because the other thing about these teams, they don't play when they get, like, they will look to run. And if Emmanuel Quickley's on the floor, they will look to run. But like the Cavs and the Knicks, when they get into their base offenses, like they're really running the shot clock down. Their average offensive possession time is pretty late into the shot clock. If you can get a shot of adrenaline in any way, that ends up being, for both teams, just a huge difference in this series.
Yeah, I think if you downsize as the Knicks, I think it potentially takes away one of the possible routes where you stay really competitive in this series, and that's offensive rebounds and putbacks. Because if you're looking at half-court offenses, the Knicks, much has been made of the Knicks offense this year, and rightfully so. It's been a great offense. The Cavs are 7th. So it's not like this is some massive advantage. And the Cavs actually were just by the smallest possible margin more efficient in half court chances. But the Knicks half court offense really depends on offensive rebounds and second chances. So if you shrink a little bit, most of that's Robinson. But if you go smaller, I think that cuts into what might be a small advantage for the Knicks. And then just to get back to what you're saying about Toppin and Barrett, I think you probably just keep it, which you probably try them both if you do go smaller. But I think if Toppin, runs hot on a few threes, then he gets to play. And if Barrett makes a couple second side drives and that creates good opportunities, then he gets to play. I think you have to be very flexible if you're Tom Thibodeau, because that's fun to say, right? Be very flexible if you're Tom Thibodeau.
Which, by the way,
I know that's unfair. Yeah. That's unfair.
Yeah. Not unfair.
It used to be fair. It's not fair anymore.
It's less fair than it ever was, but could we see him revert to his way in a? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's all. I just wanted to point out the potential for the Knicks to do well on the offensive boards, and that's just another way they could prop up an offense that has been really good, but isn't so much better than Cleveland's that I'm concerned if I'm the Cavs about winning a scoring contest.
I will say, if you do go smaller, though, doesn't it make you better equipped to defend the guards? If you're going to go smaller against some of the primary lineups, you're better equipped to defend Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland than those two. And so the trade-off is, all right, we're giving up stuff on the glass, but maybe we're able to force the Cavs offense into more difficult decisions because we're playing two of Grimes, Quickly, and Hart at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, usually you're giving up defense by going smaller, but in this particular case, I take your point. You might, and really then also that's going to open your offense up a little bit more if you're the Knicks and you shrink your positions a little. I don't have a lot else to say. You want to make your pick here?
I was just going to ask you about how does the Isaac Okoro injury, if he's not full strength or even just the Cleveland's 3 spot, because we only mentioned it cursory, how does it impact your view of this series at all? It comes down to, I think a lot of people worried they wouldn't get the defense necessary out of that spot. I actually don't think that's the issue. It's, okay, Caris LeVert shooting really well from 3, 39% on catch and shoots. Also at 45% or something ridiculous since the trade deadline. Isaac Okoro has shot above 40% from 3 for more than half the season when healthy. And they do have Danny Green. He had COVID for a while, so he didn't play a ton with the Cavs, but he's hitting his threes. And so there's 4 questions. Dean Wade's just floating around out there. Will he hit his threes? Those were pulled back. Will Danny Green be able to defend well enough to play a role? Because we know he'll hit his threes. And then does the shooting for LeVert and Okoro, assuming he's able to play, does that translate into the postseason? And how big of a variable is that actually for Cleveland?
I think Okoro would probably be the guy on Brunson, right? If you're drawing it up for Cleveland, because you don't want Garland on him and you don't want maybe Mitchell, but I think I'd rather have Mitchell, be off the ball a little bit more and get to rest. So that's a factor. I do think, as I said earlier, LeVert has been better defensively and is clearly the best offensive player of Cleveland's options at the 3. I think Okoro too, while he would be the guy you'd want out there for defensive purposes, I still think he's someone that the Knicks, if they're looking to cheat a little bit, he's the guy they're leaving in the corner and just saying, we're going to not be anywhere in your neighborhood in the first quarter. More power to you if you want to take 5 threes and make 3 of them. Good luck, Cavs, if that's how you want to play offense. But so in the playoffs, a guy like that his flaws always show up more because teams can just be relentless about forcing someone to do the thing they're bad at. And that's why guys that are bad at specific things to a great enough extent just don't get to play very much. So, even though Okoro has had good stretches, I think he might give the Knicks an out that, unless he's just locking Brunson down, might not be worth it, in the balance.
Can I just say 2 quick things that fascinate me about this series? They're macro things. Cleveland has the best defense, had the best defense in the league, but they also have, they have the best offense in the league when going up against top 10 defenses. And that's important because the Knicks defense is not this killer, but that's how good the Cavs offense is translated to, even if it doesn't always necessarily look pretty. The Knicks, though, on the other hand, they have the second best defense in the league when going up against top 10 offenses. And so I just find that matchup very interesting.
I don't know what to do with that. That's it. That is interesting. I don't know what that means. I mean, it would seem to say that the Knicks have a better chance than we're giving them credit for.
What's your prediction for Knicks Cavs?
I'm going to go Cavs in 6, and that has mostly to do with maybe Randall will be healthy, or, more healthy than I think is likely. But it would be closer to 5 than 7 for sure if I had to go one way or the other.
I'm going to go Cavs in 7 because I think that the Knicks, if they're going to run the lineups that I think they will, I really do think that they're built to sort of just throw wrinkles into the Cavs offense from a defensive perspective more than maybe we're talking about at the moment. I could end up being wildly wrong there, though.
I think if Randall was totally healthy, I could be talked into 7. I just think that variable kind of nudges me down a little bit.
We did not predict the Hawks Celtics series. You want to provide a Hawks Celtics prediction very quickly? We just skipped right over that.
What does that say about how much of a toss up we think it is? I'll just go cowardly go Celtics in 5.
I'll take the Cowards pick Celtics in 5. Also, it's Trae Young has to have one nuclear
You'd think,
game.
right? You'd think.
The next playoff series on our docket is one that is near and dear to your heart. The Kings versus the Warriors. What do you, I'm sure you're thinking about lots of the last series was my series. This is your series.
Yeah, I think the Warriors. So my opinion based on a couple things. One is uncertain. One is pretty certain. The uncertainty is I believe the Warriors are better than they've shown for most of this season, and factor in that they had the best net rating in the Western Conference after the All-Star break. A lot of that has to do with smoke in Portland by like 1,000 points on the last day of the season, but they're 15-9. They had stretches where they really did look, championship-ish caliber. So I think the Warriors are better than your typical 6 seed, hot take. But I'm not 100% sure about that because they've laid massive eggs all year at bad times. The other thing is I don't think the Kings defense is good enough to do anything against the Warriors offense. And so that's where I don't know. I would love it if you had, not to put ridiculous pressure on you, but hey, Dan, make the case for the Kings defense being good enough to bother the Warriors. I don't see it. So that's the 10,000 foot view of it. I do think I will say up front that I think Domantas Sabonis is perhaps the most pivotal player in this series because he is the driver of this offense that was the best in the league. I think it was Zach Cram at the Ringer did look at his handoffs, and the Kings have run like just an obscenely greater number of handoffs than any other team. Like Sabonis as the handoff guy has run more handoffs than any team, generally speaking. So like he's vital to the offense. I think he's just a walking bullseye on defense for the Warriors because he can't guard in space. He can't defend the rim. You can't switch with him. If you trap with him, the Warriors have seen that a trillion times, and they get it to Draymond Green going downhill in a 4-on. Like there's just, I don't know what you do with Sabonis defensively. And I think the Warriors aren't a pick and roll heavy team necessarily, but they do set a billion ball screens, even if it's just for handoffs. You can imagine Looney and Draymond Green at the top, just screening Curry's guy. And if the other big is in a drop or just not anywhere near the play, it's an open 3 or it's a drive and it's a pocket pass it's just like, I don't know what you do with Sabonis defensively, and you can't take him off the floor because he's so vital to the Kings offense. So that's my starting point is Sabonis matters a lot, and that's both good and bad.
What's interesting, this isn't necessarily the case for the Kings to win, but they have the 9th best defense when they play on the road. Did you know that?
I did not know that. I know that they're weirdly bad at home, just general, like which you wouldn't expect from a team that like a younger team or with less experience that just gets up for scoring a bunch of points. But yeah, good point.
What I think what actually benefits them the most might hurt them against the Warriors. And you already mentioned this with these two teams, by the way, they just don't run a ton of pick and rolls. Like it's just when people complain about the NBA being overly homogenous, these two teams would be, I think that's one oversimplifying or overstating how similar everything is. But like these two teams just do not run the typical NBA offenses. And all that off-ball movement is wild. The Kings have done generally a really good job. There are only 2 or 3 teams that have been better of forcing opponents to go deeper into the shot clock on offense. A lot of that is because the Kings are allowed to get their defense set after scoring.
Right.
It allows them to limit transition opportunities. They don't foul a lot. The Warriors might make some of that. If the Warriors defense really turns it on, they're going to make that a lot harder. But it also doesn't necessarily benefit you if you force the Warriors to go deep into the shot clock because of all their own off-ball movement. they might just create chaos and find seams when there's only 4 seconds left. And they're going to be content to do that. Or there's just the Steph Curry bailout ISO option. So I hate that. I think, not that I think this is going to be a quick series, because I think a lot of people believe the Kings offense won't translate to the playoffs. I don't buy it. I know that you can throw Draymond on Sabonis, but you have all these other guys on the Kings who can work with the ball in their hands, and De'Aaron Fox and Kevin Huerter, who are also and Harrison Barnes and Keegan Murray, who are also, by the way, really comfortable moving without the ball right now. And so you're going to really counter my biggest question for the series, are the Kings athletic enough to handle the Warriors' own off-ball movement? I think the same question can apply to the Warriors with the Kings. They do have Andrew Wiggins coming back. He hasn't played in months. Kevon Looney is one of the most matchup-proof bigs in the league. How does that really hold up, though, against like all the Kings' off-ball movement? This is not the Celtics, for instance. And then, you have Gary Payton II, but like, are you not playing Klay Thompson a ton, or is this not a Jordan Poole series, or how much is Dante DiVincenzo playing? The Warriors on paper are a tough matchup for the Kings, but I do think that Sacramento is going to cause their defense just as many problems as Golden State's offense is going to cause for Sacramento.
I think there's a good chance the Kings have at least a couple games where offensively the Warriors just can't quite stay disciplined enough or keep up enough. If one of those games comes in the first two in Sacramento, then I think the Warriors will maybe have a real series on their hands. I do think, though, that if you are, so you mentioned Looney, and Looney, I agree. Like his track record is just like, it is not an advantage to get him switched onto a small or to have him move in space. He's just way better at that than he looks like he should be, and that most bigs are. He hasn't been quite as good at that this year. I think he has slipped a little bit. But if you're the Kings and what happens is you expose that a little, all you're doing is getting Draymond Green at center with 4 shooters or 4 wings around him. And I don't feel like that's ever been a win for any opposing team when you get Draymond at the 5 lineups. So, the way I see the Kings succeeding has a lot to do with Sabonis bullying, inside. If they get switches, anytime he has that. So Joe Verre for Golden State of Mind does really good Warriors breakdowns with film and stuff. And the Kings run these wedge actions, which is just like a diagonal screen from a block to the opposite elbow that gets Sabonis oftentimes in post position, either switched with a little guy on him or with a little bit of a time advantage because the big is catching up. So that's a way for Sabonis to maybe pile up some fouls, get to the line, finish inside. But there's just not a lot you can do if you're the Kings. You're not going to confuse the Warriors off the ball, especially if you have, say, DiVincenzo, Wiggins, Payton out there. They're just going to switch everything 1 to 4. So running around and all this other stuff, off ball action, I think is probably going to be mostly unsuccessful because the Warriors do have the personnel to just not really be bothered by that because they don't have to chase anybody. They just point and switch, so I guess I'm trying to think of other ways for the Kings to succeed here. It's just hard. I'm sorry. It's just hard to see. I feel like it's lame to be so pro Warriors in this series because that is the take that everybody has. The Warriors are favorites in the betting markets. And I just think that the fundamental failures of the Kings to defend the pick and roll, the Warriors don't do it a lot, but just to get to the point, they're 7th worst in points allowed per possession to pick and roll ball handler. And the bottom 4 are Houston, Detroit, Charlotte, San Antonio. So basically they're 3rd worst among actual NBA teams. The Warriors can go to that if they're not having success off the ball because they've done that in past series. And the Curry and Draymond pick and roll has just historically been pretty unstoppable. So I don't know. The Kings have to run hot from 3. That's going to be the case for every underdog that we talk about. And they have to just hope that, maybe they can generate, enough confusion in the handoff game and the Warriors botch it and commit a bunch of turnovers and fouls. Like that's how it has to go for me, I think.
Well, here's the other thing. And I don't know how much my 2 questions to make a case for the Kings here. And look, I also could see this series just being like, I know the Warriors have a higher ceiling defensively. This just might be a shootout a shootout every single night. One, there has to be some level of concern about what does Andrew Wiggins look like after coming back and missing so much time. I'm glad that he's able mentally to come back to a place and play after dealing with the stuff with his dad. But like, what is he just going to look like? Because he hasn't had like the best season overall.
No, he
either.
wasn't good when he came back from that initial injury before he went out. So yeah, that totally valid question.
The second one is, how much does the Warriors road splits this season matter? So for the season, 28th on defense away from Chase Center. Now they improved to a whopping 22nd after the All-Star break when they were 4-7 on the road, which is like hitting a home run for them relative to how many games. Does that not actually matter? Because one, the games are going to be spaced out more, and two, you're game planning for the same opponent over and over. So do you ascribe any value to the Warriors' shitty road splits this year?
Yeah, you have to, because so this goes all the way back to the very first thought I had about this series is I think the Warriors are better than what they've shown. And that extends specifically to how terrible they've been on the road. And there are all these numbers that show, well, they foul more, they turn it over more, they don't shoot well, opponents shoot really well it's just everything goes wrong on the road. And so I ultimately don't know what to ascribe those crazy splits to, other than the Warriors kind of just didn't bring it on the road. And that's such a hacky, like old school coach thing to say. But if you watch the games, their intensity was lower. Their attention to detail was worse. They threw the ball all over the gym. Like, it's just, and so I think in a playoff series where now they're fully engaged, I just think they're going to be better on the road. I have no statistics to back that up. I just think based on the personnel and the talent and the history and the stakes now, I think they'll just be better. And I don't know that means they'll be just as good on the road as at home, but they're not going to be like a bottom 10 road team. I can't imagine. Plus the road, quote unquote, by the way, is like an hour and 10-minute drive, or maybe a little more than that.
Yeah, but this isn't like Lakers Clippers shit, because that is, especially game one, like there's not going to be a blue or yellow anything in sight.
I don't know. That's going to be interesting. I do know. I mean, the Kings fans are going to show up. It's going to be the loudest playoff arena in the league without question.
I've kind of already penciled in game one as a loss for the Warriors. I just can't.
Let's say this. If game one is a Warriors win, I'm starting to think sweep, because the Kings have got to get the Kings. I think the Kings need both of these games. But if they lose game one, man, I mean, the snowball's already rolling down the hill at that point.
The other thing too, with my final question on this, is we talk a lot about the variability in Boston's offense. There's that they don't generate rim pressure. The Kings are actually okay at like limiting looks around the rim. Protection's bad, but like they can keep teams away from there. Their base defense is pretty good at that. And so just like, what's to say that the Warriors don't go through one of those spurts? I mean, Klay Thompson is so good and Steph Curry's so good, but like if you're going to play Jordan Poole, who's been better of late, but he's still at his heart, he's Jordan Poole.
Yeah, Jordan Poole's always got a 1 for 9 in him. He's always got that.
What are you going in Kings Warriors?
I'm gonna go Kings. I'm sorry, almost slipped there. I'm gonna say Warriors in. I'll go Warriors in 6, and it's closer to 5.
I'm gonna go Warriors in 7, and I hope that Kings fans don't take that as a sign of disrespect. I really do believe in the offense. I think that the defense has like the skeleton of something that is better than the numbers show, but it's just the Warriors as a first round matchup are so uniquely built to dice them up. Maybe earlier in the shot clock or just survive on those late shot clock looks. I'm not sure how much it's going to matter. And the other thing that worries me is so much of their best defense in theory is going to come after they make shots at the other end. The Warriors, I think, are going to make that tougher on them, where their offense might not be as efficient on a night-to-night basis.
Yeah. Sorry.
Lakers, Grizzlies. How are you feeling about this series?
How are you feeling about this series? I feel like anytime we talk about the Grizzlies, we got to default to you, unless you need me to vamp for a second here. But so I'll give the nutshell and then I'll throw it to you, because I love to hear you talk about the Grizzlies. So based on the version of these two teams as they exist right now, I feel like this is kind of a coin flip, which is not how you normally feel in a 2-7 matchup. Just some numbers. The Lakers are 16-7 plus 5.9 net rating since the All-Star break, 14th on offense, 2nd on defense. The Grizzlies are 16-9 plus 4.7, 11th on offense, 8th on defense since the All-Star break. So that's, forget the full season stuff, because the Grizzlies had Steven Adams and Brandon and Clark for a while. Like they're a different team right now. You could make the case the Lakers are better today, right now, based on the numbers for the last 2 months, basically. I think these two teams are really close. And to me, I could see that I'm going to say this series is going 7. I won't say who I'm going to pick until the end, but I'm ready for you to say Lakers in like 4 and just enjoy it. But so I've started most of these. I want you to start with your. Let me ask you a question. Who is the most important player in this series in your mind on either team?
Oh man, on either team. I think it's LeBron James, which is stupid. But just like, so the Lakers do get out in transition a ton. No one gets out in transition more than the Grizzlies. So are you as LeBron going to be able to handle playing fast on offense while playing fast on defense? How does your body hold up when you're going up against Dillon Brooks? And hey, this is one of my concerns for the series. You mentioned what the Lakers defense has been. That absolutely, and they have just monsters. Jared Vanderbilt now can defend from the point of attack. This team is not built to defend both Ja Morant and Desmond Bane. Who's your primary defender for Ja Morant? And if it's not going to be Anthony Davis. If it's Jared Vanderbilt, if he's on Desmond Bane or Ja Morant, because those are the two guys you worry about the most, you probably have an issue. And so you have Dennis Schroeder, Troy Brown Jr., Austin Reeves. They've been more inclined to. Dennis Schroeder spends a lot of time on tough assignments just by virtue of his position.
I think it'll be Schroeder.
By virtue of his position. But you still have that second guy as a trickle down. Are you just throwing Vanderbilt on that? Schroeder's not going to be on the court for 38 minutes a game. And if he is, holy shit. So is LeBron just going to be a little bit more exhausted on defense? And if you try and stick him on, Xavier Tillman, how many minutes, or Santi Aldama, what is that actually doing for him? Is he going to have to go up against Jaren Jackson Jr. at some points? Is he going to have to go up against a Desmond Bane? I don't know. I'm not saying that's my least concern about what's LeBron doing on defense, but the Lakers defense as a whole, I don't think they're built to defend both Ja Morant and Desmond Bane, because those two can, especially Desmond Bane, can subsist operating from the perimeter. So even if AD is able to just lock down the paint and you have Jared Vanderbilt chasing around one of them, I just don't know if you're built to stop them. I will also say, I don't know how many Luke Kennard minutes they can get away with. He really did help Memphis's half-court offense. The Grizzlies are 10th in three-point attempt rate since the trade deadline, and their half-court offense is 11th, while they rank in the bottom 5 of offensive rebounding percentage because they didn't have Brandon Clark or Steven Adams. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is Luke Kennard opens things up. Dillon Brooks has been hitting threes. I don't expect that to continue. But you also have Jaren Jackson Jr. You talked about him as a most improved player candidate because of his offense, not just for what he does on defense. And then Desmond Bane was 3rd, I think, on my most improved player ballot. So their half-court offense might be better built to go after the Lakers than a lot of people who are concerned about Memphis's half-court offense, where I feel like a lot of the thoughts were preconceived notions prior to the trade deadline. And look, a lot of that half-court offense success came without Ja Morant as well. And so now you're more at full strength. I feel better about the Grizzlies in this series than I thought, in part because the Lakers feel really good at making you lose faith in them just when you might gain it. And whatever they did against the Timberwolves in the playing game was, yes, they won. It was a perfect example. They didn't have Jaden McDaniels. They didn't have Rudy Gobert. You still made your offense look like a fucking slog during that game. And they have their own shooting variants to contend with. I will say they've been middle of the road, like around 15th or so in catch and shoot efficiency and pull up efficiency. That doesn't make you feel all that, since the trade deadline, that doesn't make you feel all that good against this Grizzlies defense.
Yeah, I think this is a series that at the outset of game 1, I'm going to feel better about the Lakers' talent and schemes and whatever. I'm not convinced that LeBron and Davis will be able to hold up over what I think will be a long and difficult series. And so I'm weighing that against the Grizzlies are out of options if Jaren Jackson Jr. is not on the floor, I think, specifically defensively. And his foul problems, while improved, are still real. And he is going to be tasked with serious work in this series because he's going to have to deal with Anthony Davis, because he probably will even see time on LeBron James. So I think the combination of those two things are just, they introduce so much variability into this series, because if Davis misses a game, well, then I don't see how the Lakers win a game. If Jackson gets 3 fouls in the first quarter, like that's just not a game Memphis can win, I don't think, because they lose their only big guy that can score. They lose the absolute key to their defense. And they're so thin behind Jackson. Xavier Tillman is going to play a fair amount. Santi Aldama, I think we both like him offensively. I just don't think you just can't do much if he is in a significant defensive role, especially protecting the rim against size, against bulk, against like, steamroll drives from LeBron, like that kind of stuff. So if I'm the Lakers, at least at the outset of the series, I think there's real ways for them to specifically involve Jackson in every possible action, which you wouldn't normally do against a really great defender, whether that's Davis posting up, which, almost never happens. However it needs to, Davis getting on the offensive boards a ton, because Memphis, you mentioned their offensive rebounding sucks. They're not good on the defensive glass either. They're 21st in defensive rebound rate since the All-Star break. So I think the Lakers can really pound him in there, maybe pick up a couple fouls on Jackson that way. So I really like the Lakers at the beginning of this series. And if you told me that James and Davis would stay healthy and not wear down and not get tired and or get hurt, then I would pick the Lakers. But because I have so many concerns about the lack of front court depth for Memphis, I just don't think it's likely that James and Davis both make it all the way through this unscathed. So I know that's kind of a cop-out because injuries affect every series, but it is a little different talking about this particular Lakers team with a 38-year-old, more mileage than anybody ever, being so critical, and a guy who you think he's dead every time he falls down and has to leave the floor. So it's a little cop-outy, but not totally. I feel okay standing on that as a big issue. What do you think? What do you think Ja Morant is going to do in this series? Like, I obviously, because I feel like we haven't like talked about Ja Morant, the basketball player, all that much the last half of this season, and specifically looking at this playoff series, because isn't there a scenario where the Lakers can't stay in front of him and just he's too athletic for even a defense as good as Los Angeles is?
In transition, yes. When you look at sort of if they're in the half court, I do wonder if he'll struggle to, get into the paint, like, into floater range, into the paint. And even if he gets there, you're going to have to deal with Anthony Davis or Jared Vanderbilt, presumably. And so, like, the Lakers have had, since the trade deadline, the 5th best defense on short mid-range jumpers. They're around the top 10 in opponent field goal percentage allowed at the rim. And Ja Morant, in the games that he played after the trade deadline, was sub 23% from three, and his shooting splits have actually been all over the place this season, even his free throw shooting. And so I could see him brutalizing them. I could also see this being not a great Ja Morant series, and it coming down to, does Memphis have enough offensive counters to survive?
Yeah. One thing that's interesting, talking about transition versus half court, you mentioned both these teams run a ton and are very good at it. I think it's interesting to note that Memphis half court offense has actually been better than the Lakers after the break. It's not like any crazy, they're 14th.
That doesn't shock me at all, actually.
The Memphis is 14th. The Lakers are 20th. So it's interesting. This maybe plays into my concerns about the Lakers' best players holding up, is like, if this is just an up and down series where both teams are trying as hard as possible to up the pace and run because that's just what they're good at and where they are most effective, I feel like that makes it harder for LeBron and Davis to kind of hold up, because Memphis is thin, but all their best players, generally speaking, are young or athletic, and Jackson's never going to tired because he plays 26 minutes a game. So, I mean, like that, there's real ways for, if this turns into a transition series, for Memphis to be successful. And in the half court, I think actually there's ways for Memphis to be more successful. So I feel like I'm tipping my pick, but do you have anything else to add? Any other X factors or points to get to?
Yeah, is that we've seen so little of the Lakers' big three, and like we haven't really talked about D'Angelo Russell. It's clear that Darvin Ham doesn't necessarily trust him or Malik Beasley, based on how he's run some of his rotations, and so how he plays lineups could be a big deal. But the Lakers, in the time, it's fewer than 300 possessions, so they have a plus 23.4 net rating when LeBron, D'Angelo Russell, and AD are on the court together. And like half of those possessions have come with the starting lineup where it's Jared Vanderbilt and Austin Reeves, and that's been an absolute killer. And if you worry about, part of the reason why I would argue LA's half-court offense was dog shit, post-break, LeBron misses time, D'Angelo Russell misses time, but the half-court offense has actually only been about league average when LeBron, AD, and Russell play together. Again, there's not a huge sample size there, but that is sort of the problem, is like we don't have enough information about the Lakers and their new pieces all playing together with LeBron. And I also Rob Pelinka feels like he's getting too much credit for how he remade the roster. I guess getting rid of Russ helps, but like when a lot of the players that came over in a trade, even Jared Vanderbilt, like not necessarily being on the floor in crunch time, I'm very curious to see how Darvin Ham runs some of his rotations in this series, because that's going to be critical. And if you have anything to add to that, but my other question for you was for each side, remove the top 3 players from the equation. Who are the most important like players for or like non-marquee names for each side of this matchup?
Yeah, so to hit the rotation thing real quick, I don't think this is a D'Angelo Russell series because I don't know where you can put him on defense, because you can't have him guard Morant, you can't have him guard Bane, you can't hide him on Dylan Brooks because he'll just be too physical and get offensive rebounds.
That's the answer, though. I guess you try and hide him on Aldama or Tillman, and even Aldama is going to put the ball on the floor against D'Angelo Russell if he needs to.
Yeah, I just don't. And conversely, I do think so. Someone like Luke Kennard, who you might be a little worried about in a playoff series because of his defense, I think you probably can get away with playing him against the Lakers, because it's easier to do that than even someone like Beasley, who's not a good defender. I think the Lakers just don't. I think the Grizzlies 1, 2, and 3, I think, which is where you'd put those guys, are kind of just too quick, too athletic, too physical. Like that, it's easier for Memphis to play its one way guys, I think. Maybe that'll change, but that's how I view it right now. So outside of, say, Jackson, Bane, and Morant, and then AD, LeBron, and is Russell the guy you're saying is the Lakers' third guy?
I mean, if you want to count him among like the non-stars and say it's him, then sure.
I just don't think it's a series for him. So for Memphis, I guess it's probably Brooks, just because he's probably going to have to spend time on LeBron. He's probably going to have to spend time, I don't know, guarding whoever Morant should be guarding. So maybe that's like Austin Reeves, or maybe that's Schroeder, maybe that's Russell. So he's going to matter. If he doesn't shoot them out of games and, keeps things under control, like physicality wise, I think he's a big guy to focus on. The Lakers are harder. I think I want to say Reeves, just because he's really good and, may have to be the guy that scales up, assuming Brooks is not on him. He may be the guy that just has a good matchup. But if Bane is on him, I don't know if that's a huge advantage. Do you have different guys in that regard?
I do. So Dylan Brooks is the right answer for Memphis, but I also kind of think it's Santi Aldama. Maybe it's Tyus Jones, because imagine him going up against some of the Lakers starter light units in the way that he has played this season. But I'm assuming Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to be in foul trouble in at least 2 or 3 of these games. Mm-hmm. And that's going to put a lot of pressure on Aldama. The Grizzlies actually have a defensive rating in the 73rd percentile when Adams, Clark, and Jackson are all off the floor. Some of that is some lucky opponent shooting from 3. Opponents are only shooting 35% from 3, but like it's not 32% or 29% from 3. So they're going to need him, I think, defensively more. And like he can move around and stuff. Maybe it's Xavier Tillman by default in that scenario, but I think it's for this series, if you want to kind of preserve the offensive versatility, I'd listen to Luke Kennard too. Can he stay on the floor defensively? For the Lakers, I think it's Malik Beasley, because can he make enough of his threes and then be okay enough on defense to stay on the floor? Because he leads the Lakers in 3-point attempts per 36 minutes, and they still just need that volume. There's no one else on this roster who's just going to come in and let it fly like that. Like, Troy Brown Jr. shooting 40+% from 3 since the trade deadline. Great. Coming on 4 attempts per game and like not even 5 per 36, I don't think, or whatever it is. And so I think to put pressure on Memphis's defense, like they're probably going to be better at cutting off your dribble penetration and maybe your foul stuff, or though maybe not. Maybe they'll foul a ton. That you're going to need to knock down some tough shots from the perimeter. And D'Angelo Russell, that could be him. It could be LeBron, but I also think you need Malik Beasley to be in that role probably more than any other non-marquee name on the Lakers.
Yeah, and that may be, I didn't think it was going to be much of a series for Russell and Beasley, but it may be the case that both of these teams trust their backline defenses so much that you are willing to just put guys out there that are not going to guard, because you need to, what you're saying, you need to put pressure on the defense. So yeah, it could be a series where, a lot of one-way offensive guys actually do play because the high-end defenders on both teams are so good.
I don't view this as a Rui Hachimura series. I'll say that much. And I feel like the Lakers kind of they're just trying to make Rui Hachimura happen a lot of the time. And I don't necessarily watching him on wide open threes is like kind of a struggle.
Yeah. Stop trying to make, I just don't know what key advantage he would give you over this particular Memphis team. I think Brooks on him is just, well, we're done here now, basically.
Lakers Grizzlies prediction.
I'm going to go Grizzlies in 7. Keeping in mind all I said up front about like how Jackson, LeBron, and Davis are all just like, I don't know how much all of them are going to play or how effective they'll be. So I had to cop out and go 7 and take the higher seed.
This might surprise you. I'm going Grizzlies in 5.
Oh, I'm very surprised.
I don't think the
What's
Lakers.
the main reason?
Unless you think that the Lakers are going to play up to the level of their opponent and the stuff we've seen against, what was that, when they went against like the G League team that Phoenix doesn't actually have, but they went up against them and they turned that into a chore. The Timberwolves game where they made their offense even look like a chore against, yes, and like some of the Timberwolves played really well in that one, but you got a terrible game from Anthony Edwards, who was clearly injured, and you still just couldn't like really pull away. I don't trust them, and I don't trust their rotations. And I think even if their best built rotation has like 6 guys that you're just like, okay, like this sort of makes sense. Where are we going from here? And I think the Grizzlies right now, they're still deeper. And I know that Zach Lowe's been big on, well, how many playoff level trustworthy players do you have? And he's always said like Memphis has like 4 or 5. They still have 4 in Brooks, Bane, Jackson, and Morant. That's actually a lot when you look at in comparison to Lakers who have LeBron, AD, and Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
Like, and clearly the Lakers don't even trust him. Like he's going to pose
limitations
limitations offensively. And I think I trust some of the development we've seen just because of Jackson and Bane. I trust the Grizzlies half-court offense a bit more. I wouldn't pick them against a bunch of other teams. I thought I was going to go into this one like Lakers in 7 or something. I can't talk myself into it. Maybe I'm being there's an overcorrection there, but this feels like a series where unless it's Jaren Jackson Jr. fouls out twice or there's like 3 games where he can't even crack 25 minutes, this just feels like it's going to be Grizzlies in a landslide to me.
Yeah. Blink twice if some hostile Memphis fans have you held hostage right now and they're making you say this.
Are you ready to move on to our final series here, which is Suns Clippers?
Yeah, let's do it.
Thoughts on this series?
Okay, so Paul George looms large. That's the key. All indications are that we haven't heard any indications he will play. I would say it's safe to assume he will not, and that if he does, he will be compromised. And so the Clippers in all non-Paul George lineups have a minus 4.3 net rating. So you're starting behind, essentially. I think home court advantage, we haven't even talked about that at all in any of these series, is helpful for the Suns. I think that the Clippers do not have a clear way to exploit DeAndre Ayton in space, which would be something you might try to do if you had the personnel to do that. Were you another team? And so while I concede it's possible that Kawhi could just be the best player on the floor, even one that includes Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, I don't think he can do that for a whole series. Maybe he'll prove me wrong, and then I would really change my predicted outcome. But I just think the Clippers, I mean, it's like, how complicated do I need to get beyond saying they don't have Paul George? That's a huge deal. And the personnel around them suddenly like don't look all that capable of exploiting a center like you thought that they would be when they put together this ridiculous, everybody is a combo forward team that just, that just doesn't seem like that version of the Clippers is going to exist or be able to capitalize on a big guy. So that's my zoomed out view. Where do you want to go? You want to talk about like what the Suns on offense can do, where do we need to go next to flesh this out?
I think a lot of people are going to focus on the lack of sample with Kevin Durant and the Suns' best players. They have just, when the top 4 guys are on the court, they have destroyed opponents. The defense with Kevin Durant and DeAndre Ayton has been fantastic during those minutes. And I think that, that should hold up against the Clippers, who, whether they're going to play big or small, like the Ayton Durant front line just absolutely positively works. What I am curious about is, and I don't know how much this actually matters, but just like Kevin Durant is still new. And so if you're going to pull some of the Suns' like best players off the court and like leave him on, which you're going to do at some point, you're going to pull Devin Booker, for instance, and Kevin Durant are going to be staggered for some stretch of this game. And yes, you can always play him with CP3 or Ayton, but the minutes when Kevin Durant has played without Devin Booker, the Phoenix Suns offense ranks in the 5th percentile. The minutes when Kevin Durant plays without DeAndre Ayton, the Suns offense ranks in the 6th percentile. And so there are different ways to look at it. And I think the biggest one is Phoenix's depth actually an issue in this series? Because you get into their 4 players, you trust them all, but like who's their 5th? And I think Josh Okogie and Torrey Craig, like those are the clear answers. Can Josh Okogie be played off the floor? He's going to need to hit enough threes. I know he can drive it, but he's going to need to hit enough threes against the Clippers defense. It's going to be the same for Torrey Craig. What type of series do you get from Cam Payne? I think, and I don't mean, I think in Okogie, or let's go their bench. So a Craig or a Cameron Payne, they can have a larger impact on the series. But I'm almost at the point where like the reserve that I just trust the most, that I think what he does will scale and you know what you're going to get for him, is just the backup five, where it's Landale or Biyombo. And that's not to say that they're game changers. It's just the state of when you start to get past the Suns' 4 players, the uncertainty is such on at least one end of the floor. And I think a lot of it's offense, to be honest with you. But you can even have questions about their defensive depth. I'm just very much wondering if that becomes an issue during the minutes, where not even just we have all 4 guys on the court, but like how many minutes are all 4 of your best players going to play together in a single game? Because you're going to need to stagger it a little bit. And how vulnerable does that make you? Now, you're definitely not as vulnerable as if Paul George was healthy. And so you have that going for you. So maybe this is more of a longer term playoff question. How do you sort of feel about that?
I just, as you're mentioning names of guys that are going to factor in, the first thing I thought of is, well, so I guess Okogie or Craig is going to be the guy to guard Kawhi, because you probably don't want it to be Durant. And so, yeah, like that seems like a problem. What do we do with that? And then I kind of flip it and it's like, well, Kawhi's going to have to guard somebody. Kawhi might have to guard Durant. Just flipping it the other way, Kawhi may have to guard Booker. And maybe he can do that for a full series. I don't know, but I don't feel like this is a series where you can spare Kawhi. And so I have concerns about him holding up, having to be the be all end all on both ends. I think your point about the Suns, like iffy depth generally is right. I just don't know how many guys they need to find beyond their big 4. It's a different question deeper in the playoffs, but against this Clippers team, I don't know how deep you really need to be if your top 4 are better than the other team's like top 1. Because after Kawhi, I think Batum is a lock to play a lot. I mean, and then what? Russell Westbrook's going to play a lot. I don't feel awesome about that if I'm the Clippers, even though he has everybody. Obligatory mention, he's been better with the Clippers than he was with the Lakers. He's, phased out some of the worst things he did. I still just like the fact that he can't shoot, the fact that he's spacey off the ball defensively. Those are big problems in the playoffs against an offense that, by the way, and I wanted to get to this earlier, the Suns are using Kevin Durant differently. Like he is not doing a lot of pick and roll. He is not doing a lot of isolation. They have dramatically scaled up his off-ball touches. So I think, that just speaks to his scalability and the way that you could put him into any offense and he's never going to cause a problem and he'll only make it better. But I just don't see how the Clippers both slow down the basic pick and roll stuff that the Suns can run with, again, assuming you got your best guys on the floor, and also keep track of Durant off the ball. If that's what ends up being kind of the go-to, the best you can do is, well, we're just going to leave Okogie in the corner and we'll sag off him. Like we mentioned in the Cavs series, if Okoro were out there, I don't know if, you got one move, you got one bullet to fire, I think, defensively, if you're the Clippers, who've been a bad defense all year, by the way. And I just don't see, so whatever depth issues the Suns have, I think they're more profound for the Clippers in terms of, not necessarily just looking, Norman Powell is going to come off the bench and score. And, they're maybe Robert Covington will do something and Zubats might just, overpower it in a little bit. But I'm more concerned with the Clippers having enough real playable, difference makers than I am with the Suns, because the Suns high end guys are just so good.
I do wonder if with Russ and Norman Powell, they can win the rim pressure free throw battle more. And the Suns,
well, you win the rim pressure battle against the Suns all the time. Like they don't
the Clippers are in the same boat. Like these are two teams that just inherently, before the Russ trade specifically, and even after it, they weren't generating a ton. They don't get to the rim a bunch. The Suns were actually post trade deadline. There's so much noise in here. 30th in opponent free throw attempt rate. And so like that could help the Clippers if they're able to, get buckets that way. But I don't know that I trust Russ with his turnovers in this series. And I would agree with you. But before I ask my question about the Clippers, is this a DeAndre Ayton series? And I think David at the 4 Point Play on Twitter posted a great thread about how they've been using him differently. He's been hanging out in the dunker spot more. I noted this on a previous pod, though. I think it was a solo one. I don't think it was with you. The bailout feels like when he's catching the ball, like if he's setting high screens or if he's just not operating near the basket, it feels like he's more inclined to bail out since the Kevin Durant trade when he's on the floor with his like star players. And it's felt like more pronounced with Kevin Durant on the court than if he's not. I don't know if that's a mindset thing or if it's something to worry about, because the Clippers can play him a bunch of different ways. We're like, all right, putting him in the dunker spot is fine. I think Zubats can handle that. And if you want to go small and it's like Robert Covington or Nick Batum there,
Man,
they're not. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Man. We haven't even talked about Terrence Mann. I mean, he's.
I think he's absolutely monstrous in this series, because when you talk about Clippers secondary ball handlers, people immediately go to Norman Powell. They immediately go to Russell Westbrook in addition to Kawhi. They even go to Batum. It's like, no, it's like Terrence Mann is like the guy that would be. I understand the other guys need to do that, but like Terrence Mann is super important to that. But I do think that the Clippers might be like, even without Paul George and the trickle up effect it has with how their defensive coverages are going to change. I don't know if this is a DeAndre Ayton series for me. I think in theory, if they go small, you can say, well, no, DeAndre Ayton can just mash as a play finisher. And he might. But again, the bailout stuff to me, when he's not in the dunker spot, is real. And the Suns can do all this other stuff. You mentioned Kevin Durant off ball. The Timeline guys, the podcast, fantastic podcast. Check them out on Blue Wire as well. They've talked a lot about just like the double drag action. It's just been absolutely killer. So I understand it, but just like, and I think DeAndre Ayton can have a terrible series and the Suns still win. I'm just curious as to, is this a better DeAndre Ayton series? Like, are the Clippers a better matchup for Ayton than some of the other opponents that the Suns might have to face, or is this a worse one for him?
So I think the centers are really connected here to me, and it's complicated.
This is not a Mason Plumlee series. Sorry to interrupt. I'm calling it right now. It's not a Mason Plumlee series.
Every series is a Mason Plumlee series. I think so. Zubats is really important to the Clippers, and I think you probably want to keep him on the floor as much as you can, which again is surprising to some extent, because I feel like the Clippers, saw what they did to Rudy Gobert with 5-out looks and kind of built a roster in a lot of ways that was designed to be able to replicate that. And I just don't think that, so that version of the team this year would be, I guess, like Mann, Westbrook, maybe Kawhi, Covington, Batum, because Marcus Morris just doesn't play anymore. Maybe you put him out there and you take Russ off the floor, whatever. I don't think that's a lineup that Ayton has trouble with defensively necessarily. So I guess in that sense, this is an Ayton series to me. And I think he's probably going to be fine / do very well, because you need him out there for Zubats just to have some size. And I think you probably are going to be okay getting away with putting him out there against if, because it's an if, I don't know if they will, if the Clippers downsize, because they might just play Plumlee instead. So, I mean, like, is it possible that Ayton just, as usual, just refuses to dunk anything and doesn't play with enough force and doesn't capitalize on the Clippers if they're smaller, or is not aggressive in the dunker spot? That's always in play, I think, for him. But I don't feel like this is the type of series where the Suns are going to have to think about, maybe we got to get him off the floor. If only because they don't have anybody else to play that's nearly as good as him.
Well, that wasn't what I don't think that he could be played off the floor, to be clear.
No,
this might be the series though, if the Clippers downsize, if you wanted to try Kevin Durant at the 5, you could.
I just don't think you lose much. I mean, like to your point, Westbrook will put pressure on the rim. Kawhi will draw fouls. Like, there are ways for the Clippers to make it hard to play a conventional center, but I think the Clippers are going to play a conventional center like a lot. So I think Ayton is actually, I don't want to say he's really important, just because if you have Kevin Durant and Devin Booker on your team, like, those guys are just more important. So, but I think I think he should have a good series. I think there will be opportunities for him to contribute on both ends, regardless of how the Clippers, kind of field their lineups.
I'm asking this question because I think it's a real question, and maybe it's not, in the Clippers locker room. Who does Kawhi Leonard, who should he guard? Do you want to hear my answer? I think my answer might be contrarian.
Honestly, I think I'm putting him on Devin Booker.
Do it.
And I just think it's because nobody can do anything with Kevin Durant, so you might as well put him on the guy that he might be able to overpower as much as anything. So, but all that is the crux. That is one of the, not the crux, but it's a crucial point in the series. he's going to have to guard somebody. I think if you hide him somewhere, you're just copping out. Like you're dead in the water. So he's going to have to take on a major responsibility. Is it Booker for you too that he has to guard?
Yes, because my reasoning is, and I don't think if you put Kawhi on Devin Booker, I don't think Kevin Durant will be stashed off the ball as much. I want to make that clear. But because of how much Devin Booker does move away from the ball, I think the best bet is to go with Kawhi there. And I would go the route of, we're going to throw a bigger or stocky body at Durant. I know, is it Batum? Does this become a Marcus Morris series just because of his build? Do you think Covington could try? Do you just say, fuck it, we're just going to bet on Russell Westbrook being amped up and we're going to try and like put him against Kevin Durant and just see what happens? I'm being ridiculous there. That'd be really funny though.
I would pay a premium to see that.
But I am, because of Devin Booker's familiarity within the offense, because I know Kevin Durant is scalable, but Devin Booker is scalable in a way where there's like off ball mobility, where if he doesn't touch the ball, like he can change the possession. I don't view Kevin Durant as Kevin Durant's existence can change the way you defend a possession, but Devin Booker's off ball movement is going to change it more. And so I would put him on Booker. I think the counter argument would be, well, have Kawhi on KD, because if Kevin Durant is stationary for more possessions, does that allow Kawhi to sort of rove? You're not roving from Kevin Durant. Like, if anything, Kevin Durant will just take Kawhi out of the play. And so that's why I would have Kawhi on Devin Booker. But I don't know if that's fair to have Kawhi do, where there's been a lot of talk about his defensive decline. I think he could have been all defense based off what he's done since December. Like, I don't think that would be absurd to say. The Clippers defense has not been especially great all the time, but like, he is still, I would say, more that dude than not that dude.
Well, and just like, if not him, who? If Kawhi is not taking it, like, there's just not a lot of great options elsewhere. I mean, you know, the Clippers do have, like, Batum is a good defensive player. As he's limited, he's not nearly. I mean, he's older. He's just not going to be able to stay in front of those guys consistently. That's another reason I think Zubac is going to play a lot, is because there will be some blow bys and some decent looks where you're just going to need somebody big around the rim to hopefully, you know, prevent the layup parade. But yeah, I think Booker is the right choice. I just like Kawhi has such a heavy lift in this series, because I think the best thing you can do defending Durant, and this would be a reason to not have him on Durant, is to deny the ball. And it's exhausting if you're just face guarding a guy like that and trying to deny the catch. Because once Durant's got the ball, you know, you're not going to make him shorter as a defender. You can get into his space, but like, and Kawhi, you know, Kawhi's an all-time wing defender. Not necessarily right now, but like, I just don't think there's a lot you can do once Durant has it in his spot. And so it would just wear him down too much to be sprinting around, face guarding, trying to keep Durant from catching it. And then you're letting Chris Paul and Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton mess around in advantage situations while you're chasing Durant. Like, I just, it's just tough. I mean, can we just get to the picks now? I think we've just angled towards it.
I was going to say, this is a series where when you look at how they match up, the Clippers have more options than the Suns and also less solutions.
Right. Which is if you have too many options, it's like the quarterback thing. You just actually don't have one. There's no good ones. I'm going Suns in 5. If Paul George were playing it, I'd go longer, but I don't think I'd pick the Clippers even then.
I'm going Suns in 5, and I'm operating under the assumption that we don't see Paul George.
Yeah.
It's just where I'm at. We have just a couple questions for our playoff mailbag. We have 3 of them. You ready to dive into these? You've not seen these before. Let's stick with the series we were just on. Jake from State Farm asked, in the final game of the regular season, the Clippers were incredibly underwhelming. The Suns rested KD, Booker, CB3, Ayton, and I think a couple other guys. Their star players were Darius Bazley, and the Clippers were almost full strength without PG, and even the Suns almost won. Is that something we can expect to see throughout this series? Kind of coming back to the Clippers seemingly have more options, but just less solutions, because you're looking at the top end isn't as good. I'm just wondering, like, I feel like the Clippers were internally struggling throughout that game of deciding like whether they needed to win or lose for how they wanted to fare. That's just where I land on what happened.
Yeah. So is the question, how much am I putting any stock in what we saw in that game? 0, like none. And almost any of those late season games, I can't. Yeah. I mean, it really, even if there's just nothing to gain by tipping your hand or what. Yeah, no, short answer, no, I don't put a lot of stock in almost anything we saw in the last like 3 days of the season.
Do you know how much of the regular season, I sometimes don't pay attention. I don't pay attention to it as much anymore. to the point we talked about at the top of the podcast of postseason basketball so much different. The amount of shakeups we kind of saw where it's like, well, the Clippers and Suns kind of look a lot different based off the way they're playing right now. And it's the same thing with the Nets versus like the Nets going up. Like you can't use the regular season as a harbinger. Unbiased Pistons fan. That you're born to answer this question, Glenn. I keep staring at this Kings-Warriors matchup, and I can't see a way for the Warriors to hold up defensively. It is looking like they just move and fly around so much that an aging Warriors lineup would struggle to keep up physically. So I guess my question is, am I underestimating Draymond's ability to blow up dribble handoffs, or are the Kings going to be curling into open threes for 6 straight games?
I think you are underestimating that. I also think the personnel-wise, like all that off-ball movement is a lot harder to defend if you can't switch. And I said it earlier, I think that if you have, it's hard to say what combinations will be out there, but if Jonathan Kuminga is on the floor, he's fine 1-4. He's a great one-on-one defender. So you can switch off-ball stuff and chase. If Draymond Green is out there, you can switch him 1-5. If Gary Payton is out there, you can switch him 1-4. If DiVincenzo's out there, you can probably go 1-3. But again, if the Kings forwards are Keegan Murray and Harrison Barnes, I feel actually okay with someone like DiVincenzo on those guys. And Wiggins, same thing. You can go 1-4. So the off-ball stuff, I think, gets short-circuited a little bit. I suppose you could say the same thing about the Kings the other way, but the Warriors have just seen switches and know how to slip and know how to back cut when they're getting top blocked and all blah, blah, blah. So, I think the Warriors, look, the Kings offense is awesome. I just think the Warriors have the personnel to, handle it pretty effectively. And the point, the real crux of that is Draymond. If you're going to run an offense, which the Kings will, that I think principally involves Draymond Green in the action over and over and over again, I just don't think that's going to go well for the offense, because I think he's going to diagnose, he's going to figure it out. There's no, Sabonis actually cannot overpower him. It's just been tried and it doesn't work. So I think, the Warriors, look, they're not going to shut down this offense, but there will be stretches where the Warriors look like they've kind of, peeked at the notes and know what's going to happen ahead of time.
It's Alan asks, could the Grizzlies try attacking LeBron on defense and have him worn down by the end of the series? He looked pretty gassed against the Timberwolves, and the energy the Grizzlies bring, they're not going to Minnesota Timberwolves games away like in the play-in.
I don't know. What do you think? You're just trying to get him switched up onto Morant and pick and roll, and then he blows by him, like that type of thing? What does that look like to you?
I honestly don't know what wearing LeBron down. If there was a way to get him matched up, I don't want to discredit John Morant is so good. So I want to make this clear. But it's just not going to be, the Lakers will they'll guide him to the rim if LeBron ends up on him. I think it would be more, can you get LeBron switched on the Jaren Jackson Jr. or Desmond Bane? Or can you get LeBron just running around? Let's look, what are they going to, ideally, who are they going to have LeBron defend? If you want him on Xavier Tillman or Santi Aldama, can you get them moving so that LeBron has to be just involved in actions and exert more energy? I think the biggest thing they could do is to run after inbounds plays, because you run off misses and forcing turnovers. Wow. Isn't that revelatory? Run off inbounds plays and see if maybe it's not John Morant, but can you get Dylan Brooks going downhill to where he might barrel in to him? And that might be the best way to wear LeBron down. And I say this not as because I think LeBron is still an incredible defender. I just think the Lakers will do everything in their power. And even if they don't, LeBron will do everything in his power to where he's not going to be involved in these primary matchups. And so you need to do a lot in snippets of time or on certain sets to just force him to think more. And maybe that tires him out, or I don't think he'll get in foul trouble. He's really good about it. He'll make business decisions all night.
Right.
But
I think Brooks and Tillman or Aldama give LeBron too many options to kind of chill out on. I would be interesting. I don't think they'll do this for any significant stretch of time, but if the Grizzlies went smaller and played Jones with Morant and Bane and Brooks as the 4 and Jackson as the 5, you get some interesting 5 outlooks that, maybe make the Lakers bigs and LeBron specifically have to scramble a little more. There are maybe creative ways to do that, but I do have concerns about playing Morant and Jones together defensively just because of the lack of size. But, if it's D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves out there, maybe, or Russell and Beasley, you probably could get away with playing those two guys. And then maybe it puts more of an onus on LeBron to have to work.
I like that. Final question. It's threefold from Muckle. JB versus Tibbs is going to be an interesting coaching matchup. What are your thoughts on what each coach needs to do or not do to win the series? And so what is you're looking at, what is the biggest decision for them? I think mine would be, just because I know I'm throwing you on the spot with this one, and maybe it's the same one. I think Bickerstaff's biggest decision is just like, well, who is going to play the most minutes with our top four guys?
Right.
Although it could be, and I think this is Tibbs' biggest decision, if the Knicks downsize. I don't think they're actually built to be like, oh, we're going to pull Allen and we have to play just Mobley. But could they force them to extend Cleveland's one big minutes? Like, that could be a decision. I don't think it would be for Bickerstaff, but my biggest with Tibbs is, and it's really an RJ Barrett question, is how much, and a lot of it depends on Julius Randle, but like, are you willing to go smaller during non-Randle? It's during non-Randle minutes because they're not going to play Randle at center. Or if Randle's just not able to go or whatever, are you willing to go a little bit smaller and flexible to prioritize the Garland and Mitchell defensive matchups while maybe just giving up a lot on the interior?
Yeah, I think the first thing that came to mind was, because we talked about it, was if it's not going to be Randall, or even if it is Randall, what are you doing with the Toppin Barrett situation? Who's going to maybe see some four? Where does Barrett fit if you're going to play him at the three? Like, that's a big one. I think the other thing for Tibbs too is, do you want to maybe focus on getting back a little more as opposed to crashing the offensive glass as much as you do? Because I'd be concerned. Yeah, it's hard to imagine the Knicks being worried about getting outscored in a series because their offense is so good. But if you're letting Mitchell and Garland kind of get out, and, say Robinson's trailing the play because he's on the offensive glass, which is a huge asset. But I don't know. That's just something I would think about. It's not as big as the lineup decisions you mentioned for either team. I would echo what you said about Bickerstaff too, because, you've got to figure out who that fifth guy is going to be.
I think it does help the Knicks, like having Josh Hart and quickly you're able to get back while also crafting the offensive glass. But yeah. And then, so this is the twofold question. The biggest reason the Cavs win this series is
Evan Mobley just makes it too hard for the Knicks to score in the ways that they want to score, I think.
Mine would just be that the win the series because the Cavs half court from scratch offense is just overwhelming for the Knicks. Like, having two shot makers like Garland and Mitchell from the perimeter can undo everything that the Knicks might do well on defense. The Knicks win this series. The biggest reason the Knicks would win this series is
Brunson's just undeniable, and he manages to get all the types of shots that he wants against Cleveland's smaller guards, and he doesn't let the giant humans inside the restricted area bother him too much.
I think mine would be, aside from Julius Randle being absolutely positively healthy, is IQ and or Barrett have like the series of their lives. It's just sort of these, the Cavs have forced the Knicks to go to their secondary creators and scorers, and they're hitting their driving kicks, or in quickly in Barrett's case, like they're getting into the paint, tough finishes, maybe getting to the line.
That's interesting because it gives the Knicks two ways based on our reasoning. Because one is, Brunson gets what he wants, and yours depends on Brunson not being able to get what he wants and the guys he's kicking it to making shots. So, hey, two ways for the Knicks to upset here.
It's just the quickly Brunson stuff is interesting because of what they do in the lane and how important that is to the Knicks offense. If Cleveland is just erasing that, it's just Cleveland's they're so good. I don't know what I'm missing about Cleveland, but every time I watch them, all the data we look at, they're just so good.
Don't let them get like two more rotation guys in free agency this summer, because then we're gonna have to have some serious conversation.
They keep Levert. They still have the whole non-taxpayers mid-level. I don't know who that nets you, but just like this team having that spending weapon.
Yeah, it's scary. It's scary.
Do you want to take us out?
Yeah, I'll take us out. This was good. Everybody who has listened or is listening, thanks as always. Make sure that you are following us on all our socials here on the screen, or if you need them, at HardwoodKnocks, at Hardwood_Knocks on Instagram, at Dan Favale, at GT_Hughes. Make sure wherever you're listening to this podcast to rate, review, subscribe. 5 stars on iTunes is always helpful. Make sure you tell your friends. We're going to be doing a lot of playoff content. This is the best part of the season, to just constantly be talking about it, because everything changes all the time and it's really interesting. So check back with us constantly. We'll try to get as much content up as possible. And as always, we close with a shout out to the one and only Frank Ntilikina and an apology to Jared Allen, who's going to win his first round series.